The stock market performed phenomenally in the 1920s. Stock price increased nearly fourfold during the decade. The overheated market attracted a lot of citizens to put their savings into the stock market to operate speculation. The deviation between the stock price and its intrinsic value had widened, creating a bubble. The bubble burst on October 24, 1929, later called the Black Thursday. Frantic selling occurred and led the Dow Jones average to a 12% single-day decline. Investors lost confidence in the stock market and panic sales started. Next up is banking panics. The operation of banks requires it to only hold a portion of their deposit. However, when a huge amount of investors demanded their deposit back and the bank couldn't provide as much cash, a banking panic will occur as the bank is no longer solvent and forced to liquidate the loans to suffice the demand in withdrawal. The last cause is the failure of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve raised the interest rate to preserve the gold standard, and the increase restricted the availability of capital in the market. The US economy suffered the most, with price levels and real output spiraling downwards. A 30% GDP decline was recorded from the peak to the trough of the crisis and continued into sluggish growth or even no recovery for the coming decade. Unemployment rose to historical heights of 25%, bringing down the disposable income with it. For the social aspects, education was suspended as well during that time because normal families couldn't support it or they need the workforce of their children in order to make ends meet. Crime rate and suicide rate was sky high as people suffered from economic environment and both could work as a last resort.
Similarities in causes. The first one is easy credit with loose regulations. The interest rates in both the period before the Great Depression and the 2008 financial crisis is very low. During the period before the Great Depression, debt to buy furniture, clothing, or cars expanded quickly. During the period before the 2008 financial crisis, the debt similarly heavily concentrated in the household mortgage sector. For the Great Depression, the volume of stock exchange increased sharply from 577 million in 1927 to 920 million in 1928 on Wall Street. Meanwhile, for the 2008 financial crisis, the transaction quantity of stocks in the market increased 49% from June 2007 to June 2008.
The comparison of the consequences of the two financial crises are as follows. Firstly, both crises led to currency war. Since the US abandoned the gold standard after the Great Depression, it caused competitive devaluation and retaliatory tariff, resulting in decline in global trade. And in the 2008 financial crisis, the devaluation of currency due to quantitative easing gave developed economies an edge on export. Emerging market economies as a result implemented capital control, which both hampered world trade. On GDP, the GDP of US shrank 50% in first 5 years of Great Depression, while in financial crisis, only a downtick of 3.7% is observed. The unemployment rate after Great Depression surged to a historic high of 25%, while the unemployment rate in the aftermath of financial crisis increased from 8% to 16%. On loss of wealth for Great Depression, the New York Stock Exchange plummeted 80%, but for financial crisis, the US lost 7.4 trillion in stock wealth from July 28 to March 29. Thirdly, both crises observed government bailout and tightening regulations. In Great Depression, Roosevelt injected funds into banks by purchasing default mortgages, while in financial crisis, the federal government implemented troubled asset relief program of $73 billion. The increase in money supply by the Fed after the financial crisis is 125%, which is more than 7 times of the 17% increase in the Great Depression.
Hi, professors. Good afternoon. I found your lectures on financial crisis very inspiring. But since I've used some money from student loan to buy stocks, so can you tell me some possible signs of future financial crisis so that I can sell the stocks in time?
Sure. One important factor is the Sino-US relations. Since Trump has become the president of US, he waged the trade war by imposing tariffs on China and closed the trade deficit gap and limiting Chinese investment in technology sector.
So how does China respond to it, and what are some consequences?
China responds to it by weakening its currency renminbi. This can decrease the price of China's export and increase the trade competitiveness. However, this double-edged sword caused tremendous outflow of foreign capital, as no one is willing to hold a depreciating asset. The limit on technology purchase may hinder the development of technology sector of China, making China more difficult to move up the production ladder. China may also retaliate by selling off US treasuries. In short run, the market has been more volatile towards the hostile words from China and US, which results in financial instability. In long run, if China's economy becomes fragile and sluggish after a series of economic attacks from US, the Chinese economy may collapse and the global economic growth will decrease. With the decrease in output and an already overvalued asset market, a financial crisis is brewing and may burst in China, which may affect the whole world.
So apart from the deterioration in Sino-US relations, are there any other factors?
Well, another factor considering a possible financial crisis will be related to the bespoke tranche, which is also known as the synthetic collateral debt obligation. So it might trigger another crisis that's very similar to the 2008 one.
So can you explain more about how this mechanism works and how will it affect the financial crisis?
Sure. So in a bespoke tranche contract, loan originators like banks will buy insurance from special purpose vehicles called SPVs. So in order to minimize their losses when their loans go default. So meanwhile, investors will buy bonds from the SPVs, and it will create a capital inflow for it. And they will use this capital to set up a risk-free asset pool to guard them when they need to compensate for the losses to the bank's mortgage loans. So these SPVs will use the money they have collected from the insurance premium to pay the interest to the bond investors. So if the loan goes default, the SPV will withdraw the money from the risk-free asset pool and then compensate to loan originators. So in the end, the loan originators will suffer no losses while the bond investors are the one to bear the losses.
So it sounds to me that the mechanism is quite well set and it may be quite safe. So what are some potential crises in it?
So when we look at the bespoke tranche, there are actually two latent problems that are potentially catastrophic. So in order to generate additional profit, the SPVs will use parts of the risk-free asset for investments. And some of the riskier ones, they may invest in highly volatile assets. And some of them may even use the asset to borrow more money from the banks to increase their leverage ratios. So as a result, if their investment depreciates significantly in a recession, together with the surge of number of loans going default, the asset pool may fail to cover the insured assets. So the other potential problem is that in order to pursue more insurance premium, the SPVs may sell more insurance to loan originators than they can handle. As a result, the insured assets may largely exceed the risk-free asset pool. So if multiple loans go default simultaneously, the SPV will fail to compensate all the loan originators, and they will easily go insolvent in this scenario.
So thanks for your explanation about the SPV. So since the global market, the housing problem is also actually causing a bubble. So what are the factors behind it?
Thanks to quantitative easing, the money supply was drastically increased over the years. Because of the low interest rate, investors reduced their saving and increased their investment in various markets, especially in the housing market. This, as a result, fueled an international housing market bubble.
So how will it cause housing bubble? and will it cause a financial crisis in the future?
Sure. We know that the Federal Reserve System is planning to raise the interest rate. With a higher interest rate, it will become more difficult to repay monthly payment. As a result, the incentive may be weakened. Previously, the high property price is supported by low interest rate. By removing low interest rate, the property price may collapse. People may not be able to repay the housing mortgage, and the properties may be a negative asset. This may trigger another financial crisis.
So could you explain with some examples to us?
Sure. Let's take Vancouver in Canada and Sydney in Australia as the examples. Currently, the real estate market in Vancouver and Sydney is overvalued. A major reason is because of Chinese investors who pump considerable capital into the markets. These investors gained wealth in rapid China GDP growth in 2000s. However, in recent years, China GDP growth is already slowing down. Also, China is beset with trade wars. If Chinese investors withdraw their capital from the foreign property market, the overvalued property price may plunge.
So thanks for all of the explanations on the financial crisis. So I think that's our discussion today. Thank you.
So wait, before you go, so please help us do one thing. Can you please help me fill in the SCTL forms?
Oh, no problem. I will give good evaluations on the form.
Thank you.
Thank you.